Serious bullies of Reddit whose victims committed suicide. How did it affect you? I felt pretty awful about this my entire life. When I was 15 or so, we had this one kid come and hang out at our table during lunchtime quite often. The reason my friends made fun of him was for no reason other than he was just a weird kid. Now I personally didn't join in the ragging. I actually thought he was pretty funny. But I never stopped my friends from doing it and usually laughed at their jokes, so I'm no less guilty than anyone. One guy was really bad on him. He wasn't a good person at all. He didn't have many interesting things to say, so he used making fun of others as a way to fit in, I suppose. He craved attention and us laughing at his jokes was his way to get it. He fucking constantly went after this kid, to the point where, if he said anything at all, the guy would say some comment to make fun of him over it. He stopped coming to our table after a couple of months and I would only ever see him sitting in some side hallways eating lunch alone or whatnot. Over the summer he jumped in front of a car and killed himself. No note or anything, but everyone knew why. After learning more about him, he was actually an awesome kid, played football for some clubs, really great at drawing, and all sorts of other things. Had he been given the chance to contribute to conversations, he would have been liked and adored as anyone else. Bullying is never okay, and being silent and letting it happen around you is just as bad. For some reason or another, some kids just unfairly become targets and that leads to all the assholes in the world taking advantage of them. It's something I've always been ashamed of, and I've honestly tried being as nice to everyone around me as much as I can. But there was literally dozens of moments I could have told my friends to cut it out, and they would have listened to me. But I didn't. I never said anything. I just always let that shit happen around me. Rip Steve. When I was in high school I was kind of a hybrid weird kid / bully. There was this senior who always used to fuck W me. I think his name was Glenn. He used to punch me in the arm, back, whatever, full force out of nowhere, and tease me about anything and everything. One day I had enough and went full bully mode on him. I'm pretty physically imposing now, but I wasn't then, so my weapon of choice was wit. I proceeded to just fucking destroy him. I tore into him for like 10 minutes. I blasted everything about him from his physical appearance, intelligence, and socio-economic standing. I ended W, the most fucked up thing you can say to a person. Nobody would give a shit if you killed yourself. That weekend he hung himself in his closet, W his karate belt. There was some fucked up suicide pact going on in my high school and nobody who heard me lay into him thought it was my fault. It still really fucked me up for years. I started using, and the guilt just ate me up. I've since got my shit together, but I think about the last words I said to that kid almost every single day. Wherever you are, Glenn, whatever the reason, I hope you're at peace. I was a bully from grades 2 to 8, reaching a peak at about grade 5, and decided consciously to stop being mean around grade 7. I was a young girl, my parents divorced the summer before grade 1, I had 3 older brothers who took it hard, so did I, and were rough with me. I learned to defend myself, became quite physically strong, and because I felt powerless in my home life I chose to find a sense of power in the schoolyard. I was physically abusive. Punching, pushing, tipping people's desks over, wrecking kids' projects, and had a sharp tongue. I would go out of my way to sniff out insecurities and say any mean things I could to make a kid cry. It was quite mean. I was also a cyberbully. I remember telling one girl at my school over a messaging service that she was fat and ugly and no one would ever have sex with her. I'm still ashamed of that. This girl became severely anorexic and bulimic starting in grade 8, and by grade 12 was in the hospital and almost dead. I tried to reach out and apologize and be there for her. At this point I had done a 180 after heavy therapy in my earlier years, but I understood why she didn't want to talk to me. I saw her last year on my walk to work, and I smiled and said hi. She had a baby in a stroller. I was really happy for her, but I still feel guilt for being such an awful human growing up. There are still a handful of people who have a very low opinion of me, although I came around and made a public apology for being a shitty person. But hurts run deep. There was a girl named Carrie in my elementary school who was always considered a bit off, really quirky, and she didn't really have a lot of friends. Granted, I wasn't popular at that point in my life either, so Carrie kind of hung out with the people that I did. I remember her being bullied, and the leader of my group was mean to her as well. I may have laughed at the stuff said to her, but I never said any of the mean comments. Like others in this situation, I was too much of a wimp and afraid to turn into the target, to stand up for her. That being said, her and I did hang out outside of school and I did consider her a friend. Plus, at the end of 6th grade, most of us would divide up and go on to middle school, so I just assumed we would all start fresh. The summer before middle school started, I found out that she had died. We were told that it was a freak accident, that she was wearing a scarf while jumping on the top bunk bed in her room, and her scarf got caught on her ceiling fan that was on, and she hung to death. I don't believe that story for a second. Like I said, I hung out with her and had been to her house. There wasn't any room for her to be jumping on her top bunk. I really believe she committed suicide because of the bullying, and I still feel terrible when I think about this. I went on to be the recipient of some brutal bullying that resulted in my own suicidal thoughts and self-mutilation, so looking back, I wish I had been tougher because I ended up knowing her pain. It sucks. It's one of the absolute worst feelings in the world. RIP, Carrie. I'm sorry. I should have been a better friend to you. So, I got bullied a lot, and then turned the tables and unknowingly, and then knowingly, became the bully. He killed himself after. I got tormented by a kid 1 year younger than me in elementary school. Non-stop. I was in 5th grade and already getting bullied. Weird name, poor family, so I had cheap and nerdy clothes, etc. by my own grade. Then, he started in on me because I was an easy target. I took it for a few months because I had no choice. Finally, I was in a trailer bathroom. School had run out of capacity, so most of our classes were in trailers, including the bathroom, and he pushed me while I tried to frantically leave. I didn't know what to do, but he pushed me pretty hard. Without thinking, I kid slapped him in the face. I don't think anyone had ever responded that way, and he just started to tear up, almost cry, but not yet. I had a nervous laughter, and still do, and I jetted out of there. I then turned the tables. Next thing you know, I was calling him pretty boy, and his buddy had seen me hit him. Well, the name stuck, and now everyone started picking on him. A lot. Of course I baited it on. So I became a bully w/o, really knowing it, because it was easier to pile onto someone else's misery than face up to my own. Well, his parents pulled him from school about a year later. He moved districts because of me. I'm so ashamed of my 5th grade self that it is sad. I wish I could have known that he was only picking on me because he probably had a rough life that I did not know about. I just used it as an easy out. He killed himself in 8th grade. I will never really forgive myself, but I will hope to teach my children that bullies are bullies because they have larger issues that we don't know about. Sorry for the rant, but this hit home. I hate looking back knowing that I was once the bully. There was a girl a year behind me in an all-girls private school who didn't have a lot of friends and was very shy. Some of my friends and I were in the same after-school club as her, Macup Club. She was a sweet girl, but she wore a ton of Macup every day that she honestly wasn't all that great at applying. A lot of girls were on the same boat, but this girl was very quiet and did not stand up for herself, so it made her an easy target for ridicule. No one knew her well at all, so people would call her names behind her back. My friends coined the nicknames Cake Face and Robot Girl because of her very thin rigid figure and the layers of Macup she applied to her face. I never took part in this until my best friend did, and I would laugh along when my friends shouted Cake Face down the hallway. Never said anything because the girl would just smile back and walk away. I always figured she had a good friend group somewhere else, and because of that the bullying never got to her. She was always so kind and always smiled. Anyways, me and a few of my friends ended up getting kicked out of the school after that year for something completely unrelated, but the bullying was perpetuated by girls much more popular than I, so they had a lot more each and the bullying became much more cruel than I ever thought it could get. And it all began with the names my friends had called her, and I had laughed at these names and said nothing to stop them. The girl walked out into the woods with her dad's shotgun one day and blew her brains out. I always assumed she didn't let the bullying get to her because she always had a smile on her face and always spoke kindly to me, my friends, and even other girls who bullied her at school. So, in the end, I don't think the suicide was any fault of my own. But I do take responsibility for not speaking up and putting an end to the bullying. And I feel so shitty for perpetuating horrible nicknames that tormented a sweet girl until she decided to kill herself. It's been a while, but I'm still sorry, and I think I will continue to be for a long time. I never knew how bad it was, and if I had separated myself from everything for a minute and reflected, I would have realized how awful things must have been for her. I'm sorry. I may be a bit late to the thread, but here's my story. In 5th grade, a new kid came to my school who wasn't in the best shape, was rather large, and he got a lot of bullying coming into the school. People would make fun of his size, while I stood there just watching it. Sooner, rather than later, I befriended him. He was really cool, into video games just like me, and we became good friends, but the bullying never stopped. His anger spiraled out of control. He started gaining more weight more rapidly than before. Shut himself from everyone, except for me really. 6th grade came around, and we were sitting at lunch. Everyone at the table was making fun of him, calling him fat, and the like, and I got fed up with it. I stood up for him, finally, after not saying anything for a regretful while. My popularity level crumpled in on itself, and we both began to take heat. Later that day he thanked me, with tears in his own eyes, that no one has ever done anything like that for him in 6 years. Fast forward 6 years to 12th grade, me and him talked, and had a bro-to-bro conversation. He told me he was going to commit suicide that night, but I changed his mind. Me not being a bystander anymore saved his life. I used to be a dick. Something people don't really take the time to consider when thinking about the effects are what turned the person into a bully in the first place. Obviously, some people are just assholes. But it generally doesn't start at school. Broken homes and unfair lives do a number on the psyche of children, and projection is a pretty solid means of escape for someone who isn't terribly self-aware, as children tend not to be, but I digress. 2 things changed how I acted. First, I got called down the counselor's office in high school. When I walked in, there were 7 people sitting there arrayed in a semicircle and the school counselor. Every single one of them had been seeing him or other counselors for a while because of me. Now before you demonize me, let it be said that these people brought it upon themselves. I was never the one to tear down someone just because I could. But for those people who insisted on being terrible people, I was far from kind. For perspective, one of the people there would consistently insult or belittle a guy in my class who didn't stick up for himself. She even slapped him across the face for responding, and then lied and got him in trouble. I'm starting to ramble, so I'll cut it down. Despite the fact that she was a terrible person, I realized that there was probably a reason for it, and even though I didn't like these people, it didn't give me the right to make them hate themselves. Seeing the looks on their faces in that room made it all pretty clear. Nobody, not even assholes, deserve to be treated like that. Treat people how you want to be treated. Retaliation only worsens problems. I never bullied the nerdy kids or the loners. I was mean to the mean people, and one unlucky guy who decided to get a 12-year-old drunk and take advantage of her when we were in high school. Admittedly, I never stopped making his life hell until I graduated, and I honestly don't feel bad about that one. Later on in my teen years I tried mushrooms, and after a night of epiphanies and introspection I realized how I treated others was more a reflection of me than it was of them. I stopped talking behind people's backs. I started being friendly. I go out of my way to make strangers feel good if they look like they're not having a great day. In general, I'm not an advocate for drugs, so please don't take this as such. I did mushrooms maybe 3 times and haven't touched them in close to a decade, and I'm sure there are many other catalysts for introspection. Throw away because I'm still too ashamed to admit to this anyone after 13 plus years. I worry that a kid I bullied in 7th grade might have committed suicide. I've tried to find him to apologize, but I don't even know where to start. I only remember his first name, don't have a yearbook from that year, and he moved again the next year, probably due to bullying. In 7th grade I sat with 2 friends every day at lunch. When he moved to our school it was the classic case of the bullied finally finding someone who was actually worse off than them and digging in. I had a shitty home life, poor, ugly, weird name, socially awkward, the whole thing. But this guy? He was new. He was awkward. He was effeminate. At the time I was starting to question my sexuality, but I went along with all the haha this kid's gay bullying. Lots of people made fun of him, but he still chose to sit with us every day and I joined in. I admitted to myself a year or two after this that I was definitely not straight, and I've thought about him probably at least once a week since then. There was a kid at my school that was a weirdo. No one particularly liked him, but I wouldn't say people went out of their way to fuck with him. He was just an awkward kid. Oddly enough, he managed to score a hot girlfriend. One day he approached me looking for weed. I was a dealer at the time. I told him I was out. He handed me money and asked if I could score for him. I said sure and pocketed the money. A week goes by and he asks me what the deal was. I told him straight up he wasn't getting shit and he was dumb for fronting loot. Now, I didn't think much of it because someone did that shit to me early on and I learned from that experience never to front. A week later his girlfriend breaks up with him. Kid tries to drive his car off a highway overpass into oncoming traffic. When that failed due to the concrete barrier, he dived headfirst off the bridge. After that, I had to walk across the overpass every day OMW home from school. His parents would leave fresh flowers twice a week 4 years afterward. Every time I passed those flowers I would stop and look and remember that I was a complete fucking asshole to this kid. By no means was it my fault he did this, but I definitely contributed to his mindset when he jumped.